Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Hi, welcome to another podcast of Harvesting Wisdom. Today, I'm your host, Mike McMahon, co-host Dan Noel, and we have Dr. Jeff Steiner and Dr. Stephen Baluch. I hope I didn't mess that up too bad. And the two of them are our guests for today. Both of you guys are agriculture guys. You're seed guys. You've been cotton guys. You've been doing this pretty much all your life. I'm going to read a little of your bio, but I'll let you kind of fill in because you got some pretty long bios. You're like the A personality types. So recently, Jeff, you joined the Global Hemp and Innovation Center. You previously served as a division director for plant production at the USDA, NIFA in Washington, D.C., the technical lead for hemp, established department policies for hemp research, grant programs. You're representative to the first nationwide Hatch multi-state research project for industrial hemp. You advise the USDA office as the chief scientist on ongoing first department-wide hemp science symposium. Broad leadership experience in government, academia, specializing in food, agriculture, natural resources, bioenergy, systems research, science expert for food and agriculture systems, advanced political appointees, government officials, and various organizations, fellow of the American Society of Agronomy and Crop Science Society, recipient of the Career CSSA Seed Science Award, raised on a diversified farm. That's the most interesting thing to me. Near Visalia in California in the San Joaquin Valley. Background in growing cotton, alfalfa, hay, grain, fruit, nut tree crops, raising hogs and cattle. I could have taken any one of those things and had a podcast. So I'll let you fill in whatever you think I missed. And Stephen joined the Department of Crop and Soil Science as an assistant professor, hemp breeding on July 1st, 2022. You hold a degree, Master's of Science from the University of Minnesota and a PhD from Purdue in plant breeding and molecular genetics, focused on barley and wheat, worked as a corn breeder for 5 years at Monsanto in Williamsburg, Iowa. After graduate school, moved to Dow AgroSciences in 2013 as a corn breeder in Champaign, Illinois. 2016, shifted to breeding recreational medical cannabis in Oregon for Phylos Biosciences and partnership between production farms. After 3 years in the cannabis breeding, transitioned to hemp, which is different than cannabis, right? I mean, but it's same family, I guess, but transitioned to hemp and now has 4 years of experience in hemp industry. Previous role as the director of breeding for Arcadia Biosciences, involved leading breeding efforts in both hemp and wheat. Okay, I feel like I just ran a marathon. Some great credentials between
Amazing.
the two of you guys. And I'm going to switch quickly to Dan. Dan finds people who know stuff, and he seeks them out. And unfortunately for you guys,
I found you.
he found you. So how did it all work?
I think I was pretty fortunate. I was talking to Bob, and Bob had knew you guys. I think for many years, huh, guys? I mean,
yeah, I knew Bob Hudmacher for whole career, so a long time.
A whole career. So it was really cool when I ran into him. Tom said, go over to, meet with Bob. And then Bob said, you got to go meet with Jeff. And I think, Jeff, you were kind of floored that 11 hours later, I think I was sitting in your office. And I gave him some seed, which kind of I think a little present every now and then doesn't hurt anybody. But I think you were kind of surprised I was going to dump some seed in your lap and then get the heck out of Dodge. But thank you for taking the time, guys. I think that this has turned into a lot more than just a one-stop shop or say hi. You guys are, I think you can really help us move, if not move singularly, both of you, the hemp business forward, and already have in a lot of ways. So
why are you getting involved with hemp, and why is the USDA involved with hemp? And you guys are working in association with a couple of universities right now. You're both at Oregon?
Yeah, we're both faculty at Oregon State University. I'm the director of the Global Hemp Innovation Centers, which is a large, comprehensive research center. It was established in June of 2019. And Stephen's come on board as the Global Hemp Innovation Center's hemp breeder.
And Stephen, why hemp? You've been in a lot of different things. You've been in big industrial farming with a lot of the products that are grown. Then you went over to the cannabis industry, but why hemp?
Well, really, the cannabis industry in general is a pretty difficult place to make a career out of. The rec and med environment is particularly, especially in Oregon, pretty cutthroat. Um, but hemp, I saw hemp as kind of a way that's a little bit more legitimate, maybe less stigma involved with it.
Mhm.
So it really, cannabis in general interests me. I've been interested in it since graduate school of kind of dreaming about the potential of breeding cannabis or hemp. And when it became an option, that's when I really jumped. And with respect to the hemp industry, I see it kind of limitless at this point in time.
Yeah, it seems like there's been decades and decades and decades of breeding for what we consider traditional crops, right? So, cotton and soy and that sort of thing. It seems like hemp is like this new thing, even though it's been around since the beginning of time, because it was outlawed so long. Now it's coming back, and it's almost like you guys are rediscovering the world, right? A little bit.
Yeah, and that, in
Yeah.
fact, that. Go ahead, Stephen.
Um, I'm sorry. What was the question again? I lost my thought.
Uh, with
Well, I'll
with
go ahead and
hemp.
take it.
Okay, yeah, do you
Yeah,
take it, Jeff?
yeah. It was basically legislated, out of existence, and but because of some strong leadership in Congress, and with industry support, the 2014, 2018 Farm Bill brought hemp back into the daylight. And was at that time, in with particularly the 18 Farm Bill, that Oregon State University saw the opportunity to really get into the hemp business. And the founding director of a Global Hemp Innovation Center, Jay Noller, and our dean at the time, June of 2019, Global Hemp Innovation Center was stood up. It was at that time I was moving back to Oregon. We raised our family there. I was brought on as the associate director, became the director back in October last year, and from there we've moved forward. And we saw that one of the real important places for Oregon State to make an impact was in the whole area of genomics, genetics, and breeding, and that's why a high priority was to bring Stephen on board a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and Stephen, I've got some, I guess you'd call them remedial questions for you, but I think we have a variety of listeners that are gardeners. Some are big farmers,
big ad.
big farmers, and some are CCOF. But breeding and seed is very much a specialty, right? It's really a science, and so I want to ask some what's going to be remedial to you, and see if you can explain this for a layperson. But the idea of germplasm, which is genetic, right? And germplasm banking, seed banking, the difference between GMO and hybridization, the idea of seeds being organic or being heirloom. I just threw out like probably 4 years worth of master's level stuff there, but walk us through that and how you're dealing with that in hemp right now, because hemp is, we're still discovering all these different varieties, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to an earlier point you made, I mean, hemp hasn't had the same level of, it's been missed for 80 years essentially, and missed the green revolution. It missed a lot of things that affect productivity. I will say that breeding hemp is not easy. Because it's an obligate outcrosser, there's various strategies that you have to employ in order to get to a variety that you're interested in, and that can be grown on farmer's field and make that farmer happy. So really the strategies involved, you have to kind of take them from a lot of different crops and apply them to the breeding that you're doing for hemp. And it's a fun crop to breed because it is so difficult. But it's able to be overcome.
Yeah, it seems like it's easy to grow.
Well,
Maybe easier to grow than it is to breed.
it seems
Yes.
like it's easy to grow, but you said make the farmer happy. The farmer really is just looking for a rotational crop, and then I think our big problem is we have to have a crop that we can grow, but we need to get that crop to a decorticator, which the podcast prior to you guys was Thomas, which you guys know very, very well. I'm calling him the Henry Ford of the decorticating world, as far as for America. And I think it's fascinating what he does, but the farmer will be happy as long as he can get paid a fair price to grow a crop in rotation, right? I mean, he's just trying to, what can I grow? I mean, I called up Western Milling, and they had for $750 total per acre, you could grow durum wheat for them. And I said, wow, that's total. And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, what does it cost in California to grow? And he says, oh, about $525. And I said, so basically for $200, you get this guy's acres and you get to grow a crop. Well, it seems to me that hemp would really be an extraordinary crop to grow for, if we could get it done for $200 an acre, especially Tom and I's acres, where you're at 5 tons to 8 tons to the acre, 22 inches of water, and we, on top of that, we got about about 800 pounds of seed per acre. So that was pretty exciting. I was like, wow, I think I make this pencil at $5 a pound for the seed, and maybe $200 a bale for a ton of hay or a ton of hemp. But it's pretty exciting in the fact that I think the farmer would be quite happy to grow it in rotation after the cotton. And what do you guys think of that?
Well, I think not necessarily even as a rotational crop, but as a crop that you're really targeting. I think it's attractive. One of the things we have to do, though, and this is an absolute must, is get the yields on par as far as seed goes. Get the yields on par with other oil crops, and as far as fiber goes, really increase the percent fiber that each plant has, and just increase that productivity per acre, and be able to make some money off of that.
So it's about intensification almost to a degree, and that has to do again with a little more knowledge than we have right now. We've been doing a lot of trials, European seed, Asian seed, Dan even was
Well,
walking
and not
ditches.
trials like you know.
But he was walking in ditches in Nebraska, taking wild hemp as well. So I guess that's the big thing is I don't know how long do you guys visualize it before you nail it down because latitude has a lot to do with crop variety. And I'm not even sure how many other factors you're seeing when it comes to, germinating this stuff or storing this stuff or getting,
Longevity of story.
getting it to work. What's your take on it? I'll ask that question to you, Jeff.
Well, I think looking at, and Stephen really queued this up the right way. It's been 80 years, and we really get down to it. Intensive breeding for hemp has only been happening in the last half dozen years or less.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's going to take time. You know, and when you think about a crop, particularly like Stephen coming out of the corn business, what is it, Stephen? If you talk, Mike, you talked about latitude, but there's a major shift in varieties about every 40 miles as you go from south to north. And it's going to be a matter of coming up with the specialized varieties of grain or fiber or maybe a dual crop and how that fits into the eastern part of the U.S. or the plains states or the northwest U.S. or California. You're not going to have just a ubiquitous one variety that does all that. And so it just takes time to select and breed and find the right material that's going to fit that environment and to fit into that, just like you talked about, Dan, into that cropping system.
Right. Well, and I thought, I kept on looking for the ultimate, who's our farmer, and the cotton guy. I mean, he went from, Tom was on earlier, and I thought it was just so fascinating. He says 10%. So they had 100,000 acres in where you were raised, Jeff, and it went to. He says there's less than about 15 to 18,000 acres growing cotton. So he thought all those laborers, what did he say? How many cotton gins, Mike? Did he say
Almost
300?
almost 300.
Almost
down to
300
11.
went down to 12. So I'm thinking, wow, there's a whole lot of facilities here. There's a whole lot of labor that would sure love to go back to work. We need to save water. We know we can't use timber in the same relative way as we're using hemp. So to me, it just seems like it was like the good witch and the bad witch, or at least another witch. So there was someone out there that, something out there that the farmers could hang their hat on. And it feels like we found that. And then I was just over in Arizona, and I think I brought this up to both of you, but we found a mothballed gin, beautiful. I mean, mothballed to the tens. I was like, God, I'll live here. And it was a gorgeous gin, been mothballed for 5 years. And there's nothing but hay and cotton all around it as far as you can see. So it looked like it's like they're almost asking for a rotational type crop that will help bring that whole thing back to life. What do you guys think of that? I mean, it's kind of like the time in America where we're really ready for it.
Yeah, and as a rotational crop, I really see it. I really see it as beneficial because there aren't a lot of pests to it right now. Not a lot of insect pests. That could change in the future as more
Sure.
insects find it an attractive crop. But right now, you can really clean up the field.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question on this, Stephen. We get a seed, and we plant that seed, and we get a stalk, and we get more seeds, right, into the second years, third year, and I think you call those second, third, fourth generations. What happens in the process of most seed, or maybe just specifically hemp, which changes the character of that crop? Whether or not it reduces germ rate, or how do you stabilize that? And isn't that what seed science guys do.
That's what you
is
guys
they
are
look
doing.
at that and what's that process all about? And I'm going to eat a cupcake in front of you because I've been staring at him for the last hour. If you were with me, I'd share it with you, but I'm going to eat in front of you.
Well, I'll throw it that one. And Stephen, you can add to it. Like the way it works is, you've got to come up with that stable variety that can be described. All the major crops have certified seed, blue label. Um, there's regulations on how many generations, that you propagate it. As Stephen talked about, this being an outcrosser, if you take a variety that's adapted in one geography and start growing it for seed in another geography and start doing that year after year after year, you're probably going to have a drift, in the genetic composition of the variety there. And that's why, with a lot of crops, you see hybrids, not only because they can stabilize the variety, but because they can get heterosis out of it and make it more productive. That's Stephen's background. Um, but all of this comes down to, what's the variety, what's its end use, how's it going to be grown, how do you do the propagation. It's not going to be one variety for every place in the U.S. or much less in the world, and then how do you have those rules which are already set up, for keeping a variety stable as you propagate it and go from, a breeder seed to a certified seed that goes, blue label and put out in the farmer's field. Stephen, you have anything you want to throw on top of that?
Uh, so basically, when you look at, I'm sorry. Go ahead and ask your question again.
We're talking really about what happens to seed over time. So
Yeah, I
if
mean,
we,
So
like those beautiful plants that you saw that were 25 foot tall. I carried those suckers out. There had to be 50 pounds of seed on those suckers, like a Christmas tree. I held them up, and then I when I finally dropped them, it was like, timber, get out of the way, and they hit the tarp, and seed went everywhere. It was the size of a walnut, the darn seed, and we had grown that. And, we had a long conversation with China, and they said, well, that's secondary seed. And they didn't really want to play with us. They want us to sign an agreement to buy their seed. Well, that's virtually impossible. We're going to wait 3 months. We're going to put it in an air conditioned container. We're going to bring it on over here. Well, their germ is only guaranteed to 70%. So what we saw is that obviously you guys are working on that right now. What we saw is that doesn't work for us. And it's not to say anything bad. It's just we've asked them to join our group and to allow us to utilize what they say is their priority seed. But, that thing grew 26 foot tall in Tom's backyard. And we didn't have the best watering system, which I think you guys are all aware of through Bob. And, there was quite a few. We didn't fertilize it the way I would have fertilized it. And so when I did mine, my crop was perfect, I thought. So what I'm asking is it is going to degrade, and I guess I know that. By the way, no white flies. White flies were all over Yuma, and the white flies wouldn't touch the hemp. Now, everyone says that will change, and I bet they're right. I bet it will change. I bet all of a sudden one day we'll look at it and there's 1 million white flies on the hemp. But this particular day, this particular crop, the white flies left it 100% alone, and there were white fly bad in Yuma this year. So I guess is it possible that what China's giving us is really just what China's growing, or is there truly, you think, scientists? Because Europe's a lot different than China when it came to the seed that's being exported. I feel, I think that Europeans really did do a whole ton of homework, and I don't feel that the Chinese maybe did the same amount. Again, I'm a complete novice, so.
but getting
well,
back
I
to the
think
degeneration, from year to
yeah,
year.
you have to, when in breeding, especially with hemp, you have to maintain that variation. and that's so that the crop is adaptable. It's able to move with the varying climates and that kind of thing. So if you were to take a crop or to take a seed lot and continue to propagate it over time, what you'll be doing is pushing the population in a direction that maybe you don't want to go, maybe you do want to go that direction. But as it becomes more inbred, you lose variation and you also lose performance. And so going back to the original source is valuable, simply because you'll regain part heterosis in that variation that you're really looking for.
So can you add another? So what you're saying kind of is you can add another crop variation in there, and then that variation, or can you select the ones that you want out of there? Is that what you're saying also? And maybe cross that.
Yeah, you can definitely make selections. So if you grow hemp, let's say you grow it like corn, and you have rows, and it's fairly dense within the row, and then you look for the ones that you're interested in and move forward. It's classic mass selection where you're propagating the ones that you're interested in and throwing away the seed that you're not. That's definitely a good way to breed, but the problem with it is that it takes a lot of time, and let's see, it takes a lot of time, but it also is most useful for traits that are highly heritable. So something like maybe plant height, disease resistance would be another one that's a highly heritable trait. So those are the ways to look at it right now.
And that's something that you would put in there more so than we can get out of just the density of our planting, huh? Because that's
absolutely
all, okay.
So how does it work in a lab setting versus the field setting, right?
It is a lab setting.
If we're growing 1,000 acres of seed, and then next year we're growing 10,000 acres with the second generation seed, and blah 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 as you go along, where do you guys? How does that what you're doing fit in with what we're talking about?
What does ours fit in to do?
Or
if we still get a 10-foot tall plant with the herd and the fiber, and we still make a seed crop from August to November, and we make a fiber crop from March to August. Does it still keep on? Does it work for us, or does eventually, if we don't have a geneticist playing with it, does something go wrong in this process?
Yeah,
these are personal questions,
Let me add to that for saying, and I'll throw it back to Stephen. But when you're bringing a variety in from another part of the world, it was developed for that part of the world. When you bring that to here, that has the variation that was created in that variety for that other part of the world. Gotcha. And so it's, you can put some selection pressure on it, but you're not going to change the variability that's there. What Stephen's approach is that we're making crosses of different, very diverse plants to get different types of segregates, that'll come out of those crosses, and then find out how do those match what we want physically for the plant, how we want chemically for the plant or its yield components, and how it's adapted to this region here. So if you bring it in from Canada, you bring it in from Europe, you bring it in from China, you're bringing their existing varieties here and trying to make it fit in here. Our approach is not let's take an existing variety from someplace else and see how we can push it one way or another. It's let's create a whole nother genetic background material and then select specifically for our locations and for our uses. Stephen, you want to add to that?
Go ahead, Stephen. You add to that.
So one thing I'll say too is that in order to get enough seed, and you're aware of this, in order to get enough seed to actually make effective
difference
selections, you need to increase it at some point. And so as far as like increasing in a greenhouse or a container or something like that, you really can't make any selections in that population. I'm a firm believer that you should breed, you should grow your breeding nurseries the same as a farmer would, uh,
Okay.
and only make those selections outdoors in the actual in vivo, to really target that population for where it needs to go. But if you are selecting in a greenhouse, basically you're only going to be effective. Your populations, your varieties will only be effective for those indoor crops.
And but I want to get back to kind of the first question I asked, which is so generic, but hybridization versus GMO. We're talking hybridization here right now, not really GMO where you're adding a gene or something, right? But when you're hybridizing, you could be hybridizing not necessarily just two or three varieties of hemp, but you could actually hybridize with other plant stock. Is that or other germplast? Is that the idea or no?
Well, there really is no barrier to sexual fertility when you make crosses between, say, a CBD type or a fiber type or a grain type. They're all readily crossing, in which really says that it's one single species. Um, Hybridization, we aren't doing GMO. I'm sure that there are companies out there that are doing GMO, but really hybridization is the way that we look at, being the most effective crop improvement method that we have.
So if you're
Wow.
doing that, right, and are you taking then seed from us out in the field, or are you taking seed in the greenhouse? I mean, first you have to kind of invent it, right? You got to play with it, and you're not looking at large
And then
numbers.
you take that
But
seed.
but at some point in time, you create a seed that you think is okay. This is a better seed because we've selected different attributes and we've blended it, and it seems to be working, right? Um, but now we're starting. If you create that seed, basically, and I use the term create, if you cross it and you come up with that what we think is the better generation seed, we're kind of starting from ground zero again, right? With just a handful, maybe a few hundred or 1,000 pounds. So it's one of those deals where the new stuff takes a few years to the new seed to geometrically expand, especially if we end up with, say, we end up with 1 million acres, right? And we're using the same seed that seems to be great. But now, over a period of years, we're noticing a fallout. We're noticing a germ fallout, or we're noticing some attributes, maybe
Bugs
some
like
new
it all of a
pests that
sudden.
have come up, right? So, what we're effectively doing, though, is kind of starting from scratch each and every time. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's unfortunately one of the limitations that we currently have in hemp is that it takes multiple generations to be able to reach that 1 million seeds, or 1 million acres that you're interested in, and that's unfortunately just a reality of the crop. Fiber types, especially, they're not very high yielding in seed. They also have a horrible affliction of shattering. So once the
Yeah.
plants are drying and the seed is maturing, seed falls off everywhere, and that's definitely a target for breeding. Is to address that situation. But yeah, it really is a limitation in that in order to get there, you have to take the seed, propagate it, take the seed, propagate it, take the seed, propagate it, and then you end up with something that you can actually sell. It's just a reality of the crop.
Well,
Yeah.
sell or produce. So you guys know I've been doing this. I've been talking to you for a little bit here, and and it's all about, I think, density of planting, and it weeds out a whole lot when you density of planting. I mean, I found 6 footers, 7 footers, 8 footers, 10 footers, 11 footers, 15 footers, and they're all in there, all dead. And they didn't find the sun. They got shaded out, and that was the end of that. And but everything that made seed in that field, 6 acres, 10 acres. I have a 20 acre seed. They're all nothing that's not tall won't get there. Does that work? I mean, is that gonna is that going to work? I mean, is it, because it seems like I'm at about 8 to 9, 10,000 pounds now. So, I'm pretty happy with that. And I can shoot for 1 million by the end of 24. Theoretically, I can go to almost a million acres, and by the end of 25, we could almost have 3 million acres of seed. Now, is it the right seed? As long as it goes tall, and as long as it produces a herd and a fiber, and we talked about this, Stephen. Isn't herd and fiber? Is it all created somewhat equally?
Not necessarily. One thing that happens as you push up the percentage of fiber that you're getting off of a single plant, you're actually trading it for quality, and so that quality will go down as you increase the fiber. And the reason why is that the high quality long fibers are towards the outside of the stem, where if you're pushing that percentage up, a lot of that percentage is coming from secondary fibers within the closer to the herd portion. So yeah.
But the herd, we figured out, was relatively the same. And when we're chasing fiber, we actually can't make seed because it gets too bulky, right? It gets too bulky for you. So, and I tried to triple crop, which I worked really hard at for about 2.5 years, and I didn't give up, but I got beaten. Is that it's just too hard to make all 3 crops. Number one, we have no way of harvesting, but if we could figure out how to make a dual-headed combine, let's go get the seed, the Christmas tree at the top. Let's go get, we Tom and I figure we almost got, I think, 8 to 10 tons per acre of biomass with 22 inches of water. That has to be a record in biomass, I would believe. Especially for California. And if you could get the farmer to do that for $750 and only make $200, which to me, I was ready to say, hey, I'll give you $1,000 if you'll produce this biomass for you. So I'll pay you 5 times as much as far as profit in your pocket. And he says, I'll give you my wife, my tractor, and everything else if you pay me $1,000 an acre. So, but anyway, it's just so exciting to me, guys, to have both of you, on here and just to chat about it. But we've had these conversations, and they're super exciting. I think, the crop itself. And
well, it's an interesting crop from a standpoint of stripping that green fiber. It seems like you want less density so that you have more sunlight, and you're literally growing out a stalk a little bit bigger. And then it's the timing too. To strip the green fiber, it's best when it's kind of young and it's still moist, right?
Well, and no seed on it.
Right, no seed is started. But the shattering problem, we have seen that. I think with the UC California grow that we did with Bob.
Well, and I got to tell you guys, I just harvested it was about 3 weeks ago, and I got 35 bales. And they're all sitting in Tom's yard. $2,000 to ship them, by the way. Don't do that. So, and Mike doesn't know about that yet. So, anyway, I came back to the field. I just saw the field about 3 days ago. We got 2-inch plants, 1 million of them. So there's 1 million plants. So he says, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Water. Put in the barriers. Here's some fertilizer. Water them." So anyway, I've got a bunch of plants coming up, and so I'm going to call that. Well, I don't know. What do you call that when volunteers? And I think that on Tom's, we're going to go ahead and put down about 10 tons to the acre of compost. Drill in some seed so we make sure the canopy doesn't have empty spots where weeds can come about. And I think we might have 10 million seeds to the acre. I mean, it might really blow us away what our density is. So that might be one hell of a fiber crop if we were to call it a day and cut the whole thing down before it goes to seed. But what about letting it just go back to seed one more time? Maybe have someone make a dual-headed combine and say, I like Christmas trees at the top. I mean, I think that's just we counted about, we thought almost 50 pounds to the acre. 50 pounds to each one of those plants.
Do you think with the shattering problem, and we talked to Bob about this, is I think we maybe left the seed on the plant too long? You think that's
We
part
left
of
the
it?
plant in the field too long. Huh?
Let me throw something in here though on this,
Okay.
Mike. What I'm not hearing in the conversation is who's going to buy it for what purpose, whatever you're growing. And so if it's a textile manufacturer, what's the specifications for that fiber that they want, and how's it going to be processed? If it's going to go to animal bedding, that's a whole nother thing. And in between there, when we talk about herd and it's going to go into making hempcrete, there's going to be specifications for what the size of that material should be. How long does
Tensile
it take to
strength,
cure,
everything.
to
Yeah.
dry, all this stuff. So I'm just saying right now, I'm just hearing kind of a generic growing it as a commodity, but what's going to be the purpose, for who's going to buy it at what price point? Second point that I want to make is that, it can grow 22 feet tall, but for a seed crop, it might be that you're going to grow that down in the wintertime down in Arizona, and it only grows 4 feet tall just because of the way the genetics interact with the light at that time, and sort of look more like a sorghum crop. And that's how you're going to produce the seed that will then be grown at some other location, further north.
And it's
It
hard to do the selection when it's only 4 feet high, right? Because you don't.
well, no, because what you'll do is you'll make the selection for what you're going to use it for, the end product, and who's going to buy
Okay.
it.
Right, right.
But
Right.
it's no different than when seed is grown down in the desert, as a specialty crop is grown far north. So I think we just have to really kind of parse this up, split the pieces apart, and you have to ask the question, can you just grow? And, Dan, I don't want to put it down. Can you just do an open increase for seed, multiply it, and you get good enough for whatever end product? But it may be that we really want to look at a fine-tuned specialty seed industry that you can just do a very rapid multiplication and get those type of increase you want, so you can then use the seed someplace else.
For a variety of different things.
Yeah,
And
so-
we didn't even talk about the use of seed for seed.
Oh
For the
yeah,
oil
that was
and
the whole
for the-
other. That was a
I
whole.
mean, that's
other,
a whole nother.
for the
part of the
oils
plant.
of the seed. Which, by the way, that was what I think we, some new seed that we have coming your way is for that exact purpose, right? The value of the seed crop. But Jeff, I feel like we did answer that the herd. Once you get a herd, Stephen, I think we had a little bit of conversation about this as well. But the herd is really, once you get the herd, it's just a matter of micronizing it. This is bedding, and then this is for plastics, and this is micronized to 200 mesh. This is great for bedding. It gets bigger if you plant 30 pounds to the acre versus 100 pounds to the acre. And then fiber, when everybody talks about fiber, you can't make any seed. You can't even look at it. It can't. As soon as she stops being vegetative, or even
So it's
before
almost like
she
you said, it's
stops
a
being
total
vegetative,
different grow.
You cut her.
And that fiber, that long fiber, is more valuable.
Well, it's valuable if the
And
textiles.
probably the seed is more valuable in the long run, too.
Yeah.
So,
See, what I'll kind of throw at you, just here, let me leave you with a thought.
okay.
When you look at the turf seed industry, turf is grown everywhere around the world, right?
Hmm.
Well, the turf seed is primarily grown in the Willamette Valley of Oregon or in other similar environments in New Zealand or Europe. Okay, but that's where the specialty seed is produced, but then it's grown for turf elsewhere. If you look at alfalfa seed, alfalfa is grown for hay in a lot of places. The specialty seed crops are out in the west, southwest, and the west, northwest. And so the seed is grown there for seed, but then it's grown for hay all around the world. And that's what I'm trying to get the point about with hemp is
Right.
we don't know where to grow that specialty seed crop like a turf crop or an alfalfa hay
Got
seed.
it. Got it.
You see, where's the sweet spot to grow that seed, make the most money, have the best genetic quality for the purpose of where it's going to be grown elsewhere for that high quality product that
And
goes
that'll
into.
also to be dependent on the variety, because the stuff we're growing here is not going to do as well up there, and the stuff from Europe that we think will do well in Oregon doesn't do very well here in Phoenix. We
Well,
can grow it, but it doesn't get six,
and we
7, 8
have a
feet high.
latitude scenario, and I know our time's running out. I could talk about this until next Christmas, but the latitude scenario is your European seed. I went for 3 years of solid trials, and I thought I was failing the whole time. What surprised me is that I made an atrocious amount of seed. Would that seed work, Stephen, in Europe? If I would have, because I made so much seed, but the damn plant was only 2 foot tall, or 3. It was about 2.5 feet tall. I lie. And then all of a sudden, Compulti went to 7 feet. And so I was like, okay, I love Compulti, and I got Compulti to go 13 feet for me, and it was the only dioecious plant. And then all the other ones were monoecious, which made me think that they had bred that in there. So, which, yeah, I'm seeing you shake your head. So if they did breed that in there. So I guess my question is maybe, and thank you, Jeff, because I think I can be everything to everybody all the time. But, we all know that you have to pick what you want to do. So can we, if we're producing quality, because we can produce quality fiber / herd. And I always say / herd because I think herd is actually a little more valuable than fiber,
It's easier.
because it has a lot of uses, whereas fiber, everyone says the word textile, and a lot of people think that we're a long way in America from making the yarn behind Steve over here. But I mean, so at the end of the day, can that seed be utilized to go to that we're growing here for Europe? Can you send a seed in a southern latitude or a 30 latitude, and can you send it to 40, and would it still grow? Someone says that, and then can you produce a seed in a northern latitude and send it back to a southern latitude?
Well, you're saying you did it. That's how it works with turf. So theoretically, that'll be the same thing for hemp.
Yeah, but turf and alfalfa for hay are grown for a vegetative cut, okay, not a reproductive cut. And so, I mean, these are the things really that need to be worked out and figured out.
Sure.
Stephen, you want to add to that?
Well, I would think that as long as if you're growing, say, a European variety down by you guys, as long as you're producing seed with it, as long as you don't make any conscious selection, as long as you're letting those genes continue to mix, I could see it working very well in Europe and in more northern latitudes.
Yeah, we're curious to see how it'll do in Oregon.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
And we're also really excited, which I think you guys are too, of how that rogue seed in Nebraska, and there's other places, but God, beautiful. Planted it, and the seed 8 seemed like, there has to be 100,000 seeds to the darn pound versus, 36 or 25 for the Puma doesn't even have 22 to the pound. 22,000 seeds, whereas, so it's this, I think, that's never going to grow a plant. Sure enough, man, I put a light on it, and it went 12 foot high. The stalk was thick as can be, so like, this is beautiful. And then if you plant 100 pounds to the acre, it'll just shoot out everything that is tall, and the only thing that'll make this tall seed. Is that honest in that respect? Make at least a selection of what you would continue to propagate?
It will continue to adapt, be more adapted to your environment than anywhere else. That's why I said, as long as you don't make any conscious selection in the crop, it should all the genes necessary for it to grow up. One thing I don't want to get lost, talking about 20 inches of water, it is amazingly tolerant.
It hates feet, hates it.
It's wet,
Oh
absolutely.
my God. Even little wet feet. We think one farmer is playing over water, and that darn, I mean, it was disastrous. He had nothing but problems. And he said, Dan, I'm watering and I'm watering. He said, and so I stopped for about a month and shot up. It turned green and it started looking beautiful. And I said, slow down on the water.
Absolutely. Yeah, and kind of into the same thing is that when I'm growing heat increases for next year, the thing that I'll do is I'll cut the water off about 2 weeks before I intend to harvest. And when I first did that, I expected the plant to turn brown. I expected all sorts of bad things to happen to it. It stays green and it doesn't lose turgor pressure. It's just amazing. I mean, I tried my best to kill it and I can't.
We did a pretty good job when it hit about 21 degrees.
160 days.
The product looked it was scorched, but we were able to harvest it and get
it killed 60% crop. I told you 60% of the crop got killed. Biomass was still tons to the acre. So it killed my plants, and I got the biomass and the seed produced. Send you some, because I think the seed that was produced, it said, hey, in 20 degrees, 60 days, and I still made it. So
Yeah,
it's super exciting.
Well, I appreciate both my guests here today and Dan. Go on and on. We do have a mobile setup. So, these days when maybe this seed grows out, love to shoot to Oregon and meet you guys there in situ and see what you got going on and continue this discussion. This is something that it's going to take a while. It's decades. We're 80 years behind. But I think we have better science and better, certainly more demand or more need for a crop like this. So I think we will see it accelerate. It's just, how it's going to happen and who's going to do it. So I appreciate both Jeff Steiner, Dr. Jeff Steiner, Dr. Stephen Baluch, and appreciate both of you. And we'll be in touch with you quite a bit and have you on another podcast probably in 6 months.
okay. And we'd be happy to have you up here in Oregon at any time.
Great.
Well, I love going up there. My little Prius does a great little run. So
I think the summertime in Phoenix is a great time to go to Oregon.
yeah, I got held out on that trip where I saw you guys last. I was on my way to see IND Hemp and Hempitecture, and a 2-foot snowstorm completely stopped the travel. So I played golf I think right there in Eastern Oregon, a really nice place. I sat back and played 5 days of golf before I could move forward. So, but anyway, thank you very, very much, both of you, for your time today.
Okay. And we owe you each a bottle. We give our guests bottles of the wine we grew here in the desert.
It's pretty
It
good.
was a project I did, and it's kind of a remediation project. It was in a rock quarry. And we tested what if you want to call it fertility, we tested it, and it had 0 fertility, and they told us nothing would grow. But this is, we've got 3 years of pretty drinkable wine. So we'll send you a bottle soon.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, have a great day.
Take care. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Like, share, and subscribe for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for additional resources and visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey. Until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.